Just another quick video on dominant seventh chords. I thought it'd be worth covering dominant sevenths so that you're aware of how to build a dominant seventh chord, what a dominant seventh chord is, and importantly, how to go about resolving a dominant seventh chord. So let's just get stuck in. A dominant seventh chord is the seventh chord on the fifth step of a major scale. So here I've just got a quick guide on how we go about building a dominant seventh. So I've started off kind of showing how we build a triad. We've got that play one, miss one, play one, miss one, play one pattern that makes our triads, and we can do that on each step of the scale, and we get a set of triads for each step: chord 1, chord 2, chord 3, chord 4, chord 5, chord 6, chord 7, and then back to chord 1. A dominant seventh chord is this chord here, and all we do is we just extend that pattern one more step. So we start on G, B, D, and then F to make our dominant seventh chord, as in a seventh chord on the fifth step of the scale. That's what a dominant seventh chord is. That's how we go about building one in a particular key. Now, a dominant seventh chord is particularly dissonant, and it's dissonant for this reason. There is a tritone within that dominant seventh chord between the leading note, which I've marked in red here, and the seventh of the chord, which I've marked in green. You can also see that here. I've marked that in red and green here. There's the leading note, the seventh step of the scale, and then this is the seventh in the chord. And that creates a tritone. It creates that in this interval here. And this interval is particularly dissonant and must resolve in a particular way. So in a dominant seventh chord, in the way it resolves traditionally, it resolves inwards. The leading note resolves up to the tonic. The seventh in the chord resolves down to the third of the tonic chord. So if I just play that within the chord, we've got that inward resolution. The important thing to remember here is that the leading note always resolves up to the tonic, and the seventh in the dominant seventh chord resolves down to the third. That's the way a dominant seventh resolves. So I've got that here. Here it is in a major key. So we've got C major at the top. That's chord 5-7 in C major, going to chord 1. So that sounds like this. Here's that tritone, and then resolves inwards. Okay. I've also got it in a minor key. So here we've got, there's the tritone again, and that resolves inwards. And there we are. That's what it looks like in A minor. That's the key thing to remember. If when you're using a dominant seventh chord, particularly at a cadence, if you remember that direction, the leading note resolving upwards and the seventh in the chord resolving down to the third, that's basically it. That's kind of ideal. As long as you do that, your dominant seventh chord is going to sound as though it resolves smoothly. You can also have dominant seventh chords in inversion. So here I've got 5-7 in C major, but in first inversion here, with the third of the chord in the bass, the leading note in the bass, 5-7 C, with the fifth of the chord in the bass, and 5-7 D, where you've got the seventh of the chord in the bass. And as you can see, the direction in which the leading note and the seventh resolves does not change. So here's 5-7 B. The leading note resolves up, the seventh resolves down. Similarly with 5/7C, here's 5/7C. So again, we're going to have that inwards resolution, the leading note resolves up, the 7th resolves down. And here is 5/7D. So the leading note resolves up, the 7th resolves down to the 3rd. Okay, so there's how you may use these sort of dominant 7th chords in different inversions. Right, so let's have a look at a couple dominant 7ths in context. We've had a look at them in isolation. Now let's have a look at some of them in particular pieces. I'll just play this phrase through and then we'll talk about the dominant 7th chords that appear in the latter half of the phrase. Just so you're aware, and this piece is in A flat minor. It's a very, very uncommon key, but I wouldn't necessarily just be worried about it. It doesn't affect the way we think about our dominant 7th chords. So fear not the many flats in the key signature. We'll just focus on these chord progressions here. Okay, I'll just play the latter half of that phrase again. So here we have fantastic. So we've got our 5/7D chord again. So here we've got the dominant 7th of A flat. So we've got an E flat dominant 7th chord with the 7th in the bass, and again we can see that the leading note resolves up to the tonic and the 7th falls down to the 3rd, and then we have our 5/7B chord. The 7th in the chord resolves down to the 3rd, the leading note resolves up to the tonic, so we get So that's basically it. That's what we need to, you need to remember. If you just remember those two rules with dominant 7th chords, then using them and resolving them correctly should be absolutely fine. Those are the two key principles. So as long as you follow those two principles, your dominant 7th resolutions should sound particularly smooth. I'll just show you another example. Here's an example with a dominant 7th in 2nd inversion. So here we go. Here's the example. So there's the phrase. I'll just play the latter half of that phrase again. And you can see we've got our dominant 7th in 2nd inversion there. And again, the 7th in the chord resolves down to the 3rd, and the leading note resolves up to the tonic. So we get that smooth resolution. This is kind of treated like a passing 2nd inversion chord. If we look at the bass, it goes F, G, A. The bass moves by step. And this chord is sandwiched in between two consonant chords. So those, if you've kind of looked at the 2nd inversion, the video on 2nd inversion chords, that progression might be quite familiar, and in fact you could probably spice up a 1-5C 1B chord progression by sticking in chord 5/7. Right, so just before I leave that there, we've also got another sort of dominant 7th chord here, this time in B flat major. And again, it resolves in the same kind of way. The leading note goes up to the tonic, so that A goes up to the B flat. And that A here, it sort of goes up to the B flat here, and there's a little turn. It kind of resolves early. We could think of it like that. Or in fact, really resolves late, in fairness. Let's think of that B flat as the target of our resolution. But again, that sort of resolution where the leading note resolves up to the tonic and the seventh resolves down to the third is absolutely key. Right, so I hope that's helpful. That's how you go about using dominant seventh chords. That's how you go about resolving dominant seventh chords. And hopefully, if you weren't aware already, you know, that's the bit at the beginning of the video covered how to go about building a dominant seventh chord and what a dominant seventh chord was. I hope that's helpful. Hope that you can make use of some of this material in your own composition or sort of set works work. And yeah, see you soon. Thank you very much.